just a year and a half, but I never seen such kind of snow like this.
It has been terrible.
Even though it's below zero, they out here all year,
We had somebody who perished in their car.
especially when they're out here in the wintertime.
It hit us like a ton of bricks. It was like 8 above yesterday.
We have another young lady who's in the hospital right now. She's about to lose some of her toes.
They need hot food. They need hot food.
This extreme weather is not just cold. It's a dangerous threat. They need help now to get through this deadly winter. Hot meals, warm clothes, blankets, and temporary shelter. Organizations like the Salvation Army, homeless assistance programs, and local communities are working, but they can't do it alone.
Fund the homeless more. If you're going to fund the shelters so that they can have a mental health facility there, access to nurses, counselors, and a job training facility on site. And also give them first choice at low income so they can have apartments and homes.
According to recent reports, the number of homeless people has skyrocketed by 18% in the past year alone. And this winter, with relentless blizzards, shelters are overwhelmed, forcing hundreds to sleep outdoors, leading to tragic deaths from the cold. Take action. Donate to winter shelter funds, volunteer to distribute food, or call 211-911 if you see someone in danger in the snow. Just a little help from you could save a life, bringing warmth in the midst of the storm. Let's not let this winter claim any more lives. Let's work together, because everyone deserves a safe place to weather the storm. Numbers that freeze the soul, the harsh snapshot of Chicago's homeless struggle. These are not distant data points. In Chicago, they represent lives unfolding day by day, people surviving exposure, instability, and relentless cold. This is a city of opportunity and wealth, yet thousands are left facing its harshest conditions without shelter or protection. The winter of 2025-2026 has been especially severe. La Niña-driven storms brought repeated blizzards, extreme wind chills, and sustained freezing temperatures, turning homelessness into a direct threat to life. Frostbite and hypothermia remain recurring causes of injury and death for those living outdoors, as documented during past cold waves across the city. Chicago's 2025 point-in-time count, conducted on a freezing January night, recorded 7,452 people experiencing homelessness, a 60% drop from the 18,836 counted in 2024. While this suggests some progress through housing and outreach efforts, the number still ranks among the highest in recent years, showing how deeply rooted the crisis remains. Of those counted, 6,136 relied on overcrowded shelters, while 1,316 were unsheltered, living under bridges, in alleyways, near parks, and in makeshift encampments where snow piles up and wind cuts through thin barriers. Statewide homelessness fell 44% to 14,571. But rising numbers in suburban Cook County show the crisis spreading rather than disappearing. Beyond a single night, more than 76,300 people experienced homelessness in 2025 alone, driven by job loss, rising rents, medical debt, and post-pandemic pressures. As storms continued into early 2026, shelters filled quickly, lines formed in dangerous weather, and many were turned away. Downtown corridors, Humboldt Park, and the edges of Lake Michigan became fragile refuge zones where survival depended on shared warmth and endurance. Every month, hundreds more enter this reality through eviction or sudden crisis, shrinking the distance between being housed and being homeless. This is not a separate world. It is a fragile edge many stand closer to than they think. On U.S. Homeless Stories, we document these realities as they are, without filters or distance, so these lives are not reduced to statistics or forgotten once winter passes. If these stories matter to you, subscribe to U.S. Homeless Stories and stay with us as we continue revealing the human cost of homelessness across America's cities. The roots of despair. Why so many end up on Chicago's icy streets. In Chicago, homelessness is not the result of bad luck alone. It is driven by systemic failures that push individuals and families into crisis, a reality made even harsher during the brutal winter of 2025-2026, when repeated blizzards turned city streets into dangerous, frozen terrain. At the center of this crisis is a severe lack of affordable housing. By 2025, Chicago faced a shortage of more than 126,000 affordable rental units for extremely low-income households, forcing hundreds into eviction each month. As rents climbed beyond reach, many were pushed into instability, just as winter storms buried sidewalks and blocked access to shelter. Housing costs have risen far faster than wages. The average rent reached $2,439 per month in 2025, pricing out low-wage workers, single parents, and seniors who live one unexpected expense away from homelessness. Once on the streets, sub-zero temperatures and fierce winds turn vulnerability into a daily fight for survival. Mental health and addiction services remain another critical gap. The 2025 point-in-time count showed that 29% of unhoused adults reported a mental health disorder, while 15.5% struggled with substance use. Without accessible treatment, trauma deepens. And life on the streets worsens both physical and psychological harm, especially in extreme cold. Economic inequality intensifies this crisis. Poverty and unemployment fall hardest on communities of color and immigrant populations, reinforced by systemic racism and unequal access to resources. City data shows Black residents disproportionately affected, with homelessness rising far faster than national trends in recent years. These causes are not abstract. They are visible in people sleeping on icy sidewalks, searching abandoned lots for blankets, or sheltering beneath bridges as snowstorms rage overhead. Homelessness is the outcome of systems that fail long before winter arrives. On U.S. Homeless Stories, we document these realities to show what drives homelessness, who it impacts, and why it continues to grow in cities like Chicago. If you want to keep following the real stories behind the statistics and understand what must change, consider subscribing to U.S. Homeless Stories and stay with us as we continue exposing the human cost of homelessness across America. Ripples of Pain: How Homelessness Wounds Our Whole Community. In Chicago, homelessness affects far more than those without shelter. Its impact ripples across the city, straining public health systems, emergency services, and neighborhood safety, especially during winter. Unsheltered people exposed to freezing temperatures face life-threatening risks like hypothermia, often overwhelming hospitals already burdened by seasonal illness. Crowded shelters increase the spread of infectious disease, while prolonged cold worsens mental health. Depression, anxiety, and trauma escalate under isolation and extreme weather, turning personal crises into costly public emergencies. The scale is stark. A 2025 University of Illinois Chicago study found the average life expectancy for people experiencing homelessness in Illinois is just 56.3 years, nearly 20 years shorter than the general population. Frostbite rates among Chicago's unsheltered exceeded 1,270 cases per 100,000 life years, with amputations following at alarming levels, creating permanent harm and long-term healthcare costs. Addiction deepens the crisis. The 2025 point-in-time count reported 15.5% of unhoused adults struggled with substance use, often untreated due to disrupted access to care during storms. Homeless individuals also face higher risks of violent victimization, pulling law enforcement into constant crisis response. These are not abstract outcomes. Families watch loved ones decline, communities absorb massive costs, and cities divert resources from education and development to survival alone. Homelessness reveals how fragile stability can be for anyone facing illness, job loss, or financial strain. On U.S. Homeless Stories, we document these realities to show how homelessness shapes the health and future of entire cities. If these stories matter to you, subscribe to U.S. Homeless Stories and stay with us as we continue revealing the human cost behind America's homelessness crisis. The housing squeeze, when shelter becomes a luxury out of reach. Chicago's homelessness crisis is being driven by one clear force. Housing costs have risen beyond what ordinary people can survive. Rents keep climbing while wages stay nearly the same. and that gap is pushing thousands of working residents out of their homes and onto the streets. In 2025, Chicago faced a shortage of more than 126,000 affordable rental units for extremely low-income households. Across Illinois, over 442,000 households were competing for fewer than 150,000 affordable homes. These numbers are not abstract. They mean hundreds of evictions every month. Families are forced out with little warning, their belongings left on sidewalks, and no realistic place to go. Average rent in Chicago reached roughly $2,400 per month by late 2025. In many neighborhoods, rent increases are far higher than any wage growth earned by service workers, drivers, caregivers, or warehouse employees. One missed paycheck, one medical emergency, or one rent hike is enough to trigger eviction and total housing loss. Once eviction happens, the fall is immediate. Shelters are overcrowded. Many people are turned away and left outside. They sleep under bridges, on frozen sidewalks, or in tents buried under snow. Chicago winters are brutal. Sub-zero temperatures, wind chills, and heavy snowfall turn homelessness into a fight for survival. Without heat or shelter, people suffer frostbite, severe illness, and in some cases, death. The hardest hit are those already vulnerable: veterans, seniors on fixed incomes, single parents, young adults aging out of foster care, and workers living paycheck to paycheck. After losing housing, keeping a job becomes nearly impossible. Without rest, safety, or an address, stability collapses quickly. Homelessness is not caused by personal failure. It is the result of a housing system that treats shelter as a commodity instead of a basic necessity. The uncomfortable truth is that many people watching are far closer to homelessness than they realize. If a sudden layoff, illness, or rent increase happened tomorrow, would you still have a place to live? This is not just their crisis. It is a warning. When housing becomes unaffordable, anyone can end up on the streets. Stay with us as we expose what is happening across Chicago and what must change to stop more lives from being lost to the cold. If this story matters to you, support it, because visibility is the first step toward accountability and change. Silent Scream: the gaping hole in mental health and addiction care. Behind Chicago's homelessness crisis is a painful reality that rarely gets enough attention: the severe lack of mental health and addiction services that leaves thousands of people stuck in survival mode with no path forward. Many are battling depression, PTSD, or deep psychological trauma while living on the streets, where every day is already a fight to stay alive. Picture someone struggling with anxiety or flashbacks, wrapped in a thin blanket as a winter storm tears through the city, the freezing wind echoing the chaos in their mind. Without timely care, these struggles go untreated, turning manageable conditions into walls that block housing, employment, and recovery. The data exposes how widespread this suffering is. Chicago's 2025 point-in-time count reported that 29% of adults experiencing homelessness were living with a mental health disorder. Another 15.5% were dealing with substance use disorders, often intertwined with mental illness. Yet access to treatment remains extremely limited, with waitlists lasting months in a city where immediate care can mean the difference between surviving a sub-zero night and not waking up. The Chicago Coalition to End Homelessness adds further context. In 2025, nearly 1 in 4 people surveyed reported needing or receiving mental health or substance use support, showing a gap where demand far exceeds available services, especially in underserved neighborhoods where clinics are scarce and travel during winter becomes nearly impossible. For many, this lack of care creates a brutal cycle. Mental illness or addiction leads to job loss and eviction. Life on the streets worsens symptoms through isolation, fear, and constant exposure to the elements. Without coordinated treatment, the cycle repeats, and winter becomes a deadly accelerant. Frostbite and hypothermia take lives, but hopelessness destroys people long before the cold does. These stories are not rare. They include veterans carrying invisible wounds, families torn apart, and young people entering adulthood without any safety net. While systems meant to help fall short again and again, it forces an uncomfortable question. If grief, financial stress, or a personal crisis overwhelmed you without help nearby, how stable would your own life remain? This is why mental health support is not optional. It is not charity. It is prevention. On U.S. Homeless Stories, we document these realities to make sure they are seen and not ignored. Stay with us as we continue exposing what's happening on Chicago's streets and across America. If these stories matter to you, subscribe to U.S. Homeless Stories and help amplify voices that too often go unheard. Steps forward. Amid the storm, current efforts to combat the crisis. Amid Chicago's brutal winters, marked by heavy blizzards and cutting cold, coordinated efforts are underway to slow the growth of homelessness and offer stability to people exposed to the elements. Central to these efforts is Chicago's Plan 2.0 to end homelessness, a long-term 7-year strategy that has been reaffirmed in recent years. The plan focuses on expanding stable, affordable housing while strengthening support systems for households at risk, particularly youth and individuals facing serious health challenges. Updated in 2025, the initiative brought a 21% increase in city funding for homelessness services, directing millions of dollars toward additional shelter capacity and wraparound support programs, as outlined in the 2025 Annual Report on Homelessness. Even so, the winter of 2025-2026, with record snowfall and prolonged cold, pushed emergency systems to their limits as officials worked to prevent weather-related deaths. At the state level, Illinois' Home Illinois Plan for 2024-2026 complements these efforts by integrating mental health services with housing solutions, with the goal of reducing racial disparities in homelessness through coordinated systems of care. The plan includes technical assistance for prevention strategies and expanded veteran support programs set to launch in early 2026. Together, these policies have produced measurable results. Housing first approaches have helped move hundreds of people into permanent housing without preconditions, offering not only shelter, but a foundation for recovery. However, limited budgets mean that during extreme cold events, such as December 2025 storms that dropped feet of snow, not everyone can be sheltered immediately, forcing advocates to rely on pop-up warming centers and mobile outreach teams. Beyond government programs, community organizations play a critical role. Groups such as the Chicago Coalition to End Homelessness work collaboratively on data-driven strategies that address root causes while meeting urgent needs. Volunteers distribute blankets and hot meals in snow-covered encampments, while local programs connect individuals to job training and employment opportunities as the economy recovers. Together, these efforts reflect a growing understanding that homelessness cannot be solved with a single solution, but requires layered, compassionate responses where every shelter bed, counseling session, and outreach visit contributes to public safety and human dignity. This reality invites reflection. If illness or sudden hardship disrupted your life, wouldn't you hope for a system strong enough to catch you before everything collapsed? That shared vulnerability is why these stories matter. On U.S. Homeless Stories, we document what is working, what is failing, and what still needs to change, so these realities are not ignored or forgotten. If you want to continue following the real human impact behind policies, winter survival, and life on the streets, consider subscribing to U.S. Homeless Stories. Your support helps keep these stories visible and ensures more voices are heard as we continue exploring homelessness across Chicago and America. Paths to Hope. bold ideas for breaking the cycle of cold and despair. Looking toward a future where Chicago's streets no longer echo with quiet desperation, proposed solutions are gaining momentum, combining affordable housing expansion with comprehensive mental health support to break the entrenched cycle of homelessness. At the center of these proposals is a large-scale investment in new affordable housing, with advocates calling for thousands of targeted developments in 2026 aimed specifically at low-income families and individuals. These efforts could prevent hundreds of evictions each year through rent stabilization measures designed to cap increases at sustainable levels. Illinois' fiscal year 2026 budget proposals include $282.7 million for the Home Illinois line item, a dedicated fund intended to strengthen housing stability while integrating essential services. Though modest reductions compared to previous years underline the urgency of continued advocacy to address the estimated 126,000 unit housing shortage.
So we'll see you next time, man. How you doing? All right.
Mental health solutions remain just as critical. Proposed strategies focus on embedding recovery and treatment programs directly into housing initiatives, addressing the 29% of unhoused adults living with mental health disorders. This includes expanding accessible clinics and supportive services that combine addiction treatment, counseling, and job training. As outlined in the state's Plan to Prevent and End Homelessness for 2024-2026. These approaches are not theoretical. They are informed by pilot programs where integrated care has reduced repeat homelessness by offering not just shelter, but tools for long-term independence. A veteran receiving consistent therapy while securing stable work, or a family rebuilding life in subsidized housing with on-site counseling, shows how stability becomes possible, especially when homes are designed to withstand Chicago's brutal winters. Community-driven efforts further strengthen this framework. Flexible housing pools, funded by entities such as Cook County, have expanded supportive housing options, with 2025 investments creating units paired with essential services. These environments allow recovery to happen away from the isolation and danger of winter encampments. Together, these measures form a comprehensive blueprint that prioritizes dignity and recognizes that ending homelessness requires sustained commitment across government, communities, and the public, transforming scattered responses into a unified effort against long-term instability.
No worries, baby. Hi, baby. How you doing?
This raises an important question.
Here you go, baby. Here you go
If an unexpected crisis, a medical emergency, job loss, or family disruption pushed you to the edge, how vital would this kind of integrated support be in helping you regain stability? That perspective reminds us why these solutions matter. Not just for those on the streets today, but for any of us tomorrow.
This one's flavored.
On U.S. Homeless Stories, we follow these ideas closely, documenting not only the suffering, but the paths forward that could change lives.
All right, y'all clean up.
If you want to keep exploring the real forces behind homelessness and the solutions that could reshape cities like Chicago, consider subscribing to U.S. Homeless Stories and stay connected as we continue uncovering what it will take to build a safer, more humane future for everyone. A call from the heart, building a Chicago where no one freezes alone. As this deeply moving exploration into Chicago's homelessness crisis reaches its final moments, we are left at the intersection of empathy and action, looking across a city where the relentless blizzards of the 2025-2026 winter have not only buried streets under snow, but also exposed the fragile threads that bind us through shared humanity. This is not a distant story told only through statistics or headline. It is a lived reality for thousands. The January 2025 point-in-time count recorded 7,452 individuals experiencing homelessness on a single night, 136 in unstable shelter situations, and 1,016 living unsheltered in the open cold. While this represented a 60% decrease from the alarming 18,036 counted in 2024, it still ranks among the highest totals in recent years, revealing how economic pressure and policy gaps continue to push people into crisis. By early 2026, new reports painted an even darker outlook. Proposed federal rule changes threatened the removal of 279 HIV-dedicated housing units in Chicago alone, placing up to 4,000 residents at risk of displacement and further intensifying the crisis during ongoing cold snaps that had already stretched emergency services thin. These figures are not abstract. They represent mothers shielding children from freezing winds, veterans reliving past trauma as frost numbs their hands, and elderly residents whose final years dissolve into nightly searches for warmth in alleys turned icy corridors. Each story reflects resilience amid profound hardship, revealing quiet dignity even as storms rage overhead. Within this landscape of struggle, we see reflections of our own lives. It invites honest reflection. What if a sudden illness, a job loss, or an unexpected eviction forced you into the same frozen uncertainty, stripping away the stability many assume will always remain? This shared vulnerability is not meant to frighten, but to awaken responsibility through volunteering, donating essentials, or simply challenging stigma in everyday conversations. Let us pause here in quiet reflection, offering a heartfelt wish, perhaps even a silent prayer, for those enduring the cold tonight. May they find warmth through unexpected kindness, strength through resilience, and a path toward the safety of home. And for those of us watching together, may this story spark compassion that leads to action, reminding us that by helping others, we protect our own humanity. On U.S. Homeless Stories, we are committed to documenting these realities, not to sensationalize suffering, but to ensure these lives are seen and remembered. Organizations like the Chicago Coalition to End Homelessness continue working towards systemic change, but real momentum grows when each of us contributes. Together, with empathy and resolve, Chicago can become a city where no one freezes alone. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to U.S. Homeless Stories to stay with us as we continue sharing the real human stories behind America's homelessness crisis.
No, Tuesday is taken, okay.